Good. Right, here we go. So welcome to episode 14 of Spilling the Tea. Today we have Emma Biggin with us. Emma is a sports coach, psychologist, and we went to school together. I'm going to let Emma do her thing and introduce herself. So Emma, if you start with a background, we can skip the school part and go from there if you want to.
Yeah, my memory doesn't go that far back.
Yeah, well, yeah, because I was an idiot.
So yeah, let's go maybe from uni. I did psychology at undergrad. Always kind of had a fascination, but I didn't really know what area of psychology I wanted to go into afterwards. So I actually took a bit of time out after that to figure things out. I tried working in hospitals, special needs schools, bit of a mix. And then I kind of realized that I've always loved sport. I've always played sports. Like football was my main one growing up.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm from a family that my dad is massively into golf,
Yeah.
and it turns up in every single conversation that you have.
That doesn't
It's
sound like your dad.
incredible what he gets it into. So yeah, then I was like, well, why don't I kind of put those two aspects of life together? And that's when I did my master's in sports psychology. So I finished that last year, I believe, and I'm now on a training course to become like a chartered psychologist because it's protected. You have to do an extra training course afterwards, so you work under supervision is essentially what happens there.
Right. And I know a little bit about what you've been up to recently, but can you go through the sort of job roles you've had in the last 12 months? Because they're
Yeah,
pretty cool.
so yes, it has been. So I've been working with a pro football team. I was with Ebbsfleet United for their last season. Yeah, that was kind of my first experience in providing sports psychology.
Yeah.
So a lot of working with players, both on like an individual, but also kind of workshop basis, working with managers, working with the support staff, kind of a bit of everything within that. Obviously, I don't know if anyone that will be listening supports Ebbsfleet or follows National League, but they were in a relegation battle as well. So there was, a lot of work around managing that pressure and
Yeah.
keeping up the consistency of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I've done some work with the ladies rugby team. And last week I was actually up in Nottingham at the Touch Rugby World Cup, where I've been working with the Wales international team, which really proud of all of them. They smashed it this week, especially as kind of a up and coming team. They really did themselves proud, and it was a great week. Really good experience, a bit of an eye opener into a whole new world of sport.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was incredible.
It's not one of those sports you hear a lot about, but to be at a World Cup for anything is a pretty nice CV filler, I suppose.
Yeah, it doesn't look bad.
Yeah.
Doesn't look bad at all.
I can imagine. Have you got anything lined up? Have you got your next steps lined up yet? Is there anything in the pipeline?
So I'm a tennis coach. So
Yeah.
I've got a couple of connections in tennis, and I'm currently in discussions about providing some sports psychology to a performance kind of group
Yeah.
nearby that
Nice.
hopefully will be on a regular. Obviously looking to get into golf. I've had a couple
Yeah.
of meetings with different people about working kind of within the world of golf. So yeah, there's a few things on the doorstep that hopefully I'll be starting to go through very soon.
I know my organisation is absolutely shocking, but we are definitely going to be doing a workshop at the golf place or the golf centre that I'm at the moment. So that'll be something for some people to look out for that listen to this. We'll definitely be doing some form of workshop, an evening, a day, whatever it be, at my golf centre. So that'll be pretty cool. Right, let's get into it then, Emma. What are the benefits of working with a sports psychologist as a golfer at any level?
So I think that's an important point. I think there's this whole idea that a sports psychologist is for your top 5% of athletes.
Yeah.
And it's not accessible, or it's not, applicable to anyone else. But but actually like the degree I did is in sport and exercise psychology. So let's say kind of at the lower end, it's about engaging people in sport or in exercise. How do you keep people motivated? How do you keep people engaged?
Yeah.
How do you set goals that keep you kind of going and achieving things at no matter what level you're actually performing at? And then, like I say, it goes all the way up to your elite sport, where it's more about trying to gain like a 1% advantage over those people that you're training with or playing against. Because obviously, kind of the higher in sport you get, physically, the more similar people become. You know, they've all put in the training, they all eat well, they all sleep well. So then it's that kind of 1% edge over everyone else. So it's massively applicable to anyone. And I think there's also a big stigma. I think people get confused with psychology and psychiatry and think if I'm seeing a sports psychologist, I've got something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's not the case. Like I say, my focus really is on performance.
Yeah.
Obviously, it'll be individually catered, and there might be times that something comes up where they say, I'm really struggling with this. Can we work through it? But the main focus of things is really performance outcomes rather than anything else. So it's not a sign of weakness seeking like psychology support.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of people that will resonate with that point for sure.
Yeah.
If you're an amateur in the golfing world, what's the best route to go around maybe finding or choosing the right psychologist for them? Because obviously it's with any coaching. Even with me, we tend to do a 30-minute free swing assessment first of all to see if personalities match, just to see that sort of thing. How about what would you see in psychology? Is there similar things like that, or how would an amateur golfer go find a psychologist that would work for them?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's 2 points of this. However much, you know, sports psychology should be accessible to everyone. It can be difficult to seek because, you know, it can be typically those that work with your elite athletes can be quite expensive, truthfully. And so it actually puts a lot of amateurs off because they think, well, I'm not spending that on something extra when I'm already paying for the sport.
I think it's overlooked, isn't it? It's overlooked that its value isn't as thought of as it probably should be. It's the same that all the value is in the equipment over the coaching and the other side of it in the majority of sports, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, you know, obviously I'm biased because I do sports psychology, but I'd argue that every sport is nearly as much mental as it is physical.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's always a mental side of a game, and it plays a huge part in kind of success and enjoyment as well. But yeah, so I think the first thing is being willing to look out for, so like I write blogs, for example, for a sports psychology firm. So the idea is to get kind of some of the concepts written in a way that is accessible to people. And, you know, it's on the internet, doesn't need to be paid for. You can kind of look through that way, same as books. There's so many people now that have written books, especially about like specific sports. I know that Dr. Bob Bratella does a load in golf.
Yeah.
And even those, they're a really good way of even having a knowledge about sports psychology, and that itself can kind of help in your own game.
Yeah.
So there's definitely kind of that side of it that actually you can seek your own support in that way. But like you say, some sports psychologists will have an area of expertise or an area of interest. So you could base it off of that. You could look and say, this is what my focus is. I'm going to find someone that matches. But truthfully, like you said, it's whether you get on with the person. You know, and that's as much for the psychologist to learn as it is for the athlete. Sometimes there's nothing we can do to have more of an effect on someone. If you don't click, you don't click.
Yeah.
And that's in every aspect of life. You know, you don't walk into a room and click with every single person in there. So it's accepting that on both sides and being willing as an athlete to say, I don't have that connection. which is obviously going to restrict you opening up and having conversations. Maybe they're not relatable, so you don't have that same level of respect.
Yeah.
But also for the psychologist, I guess the challenge is let's say the focus for the psychologist should always be that person. And actually sometimes the best thing for that person is to say, you need to find someone else.
Yeah.
Because this isn't working for you right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, rapport and getting on with someone and building a relationship with them is probably, I would argue, the most important part of any psychology, whether it's clinical, education, sport, literally any part of it.
Yeah, I would be close to saying a very similar thing with golf. The problem is if you don't have the rapport, you probably don't have the trust of whoever you're working with, which then is, are they going to take on board anything that you say, is where you go from there. And as your main aim would be, my main aim is to get someone better, performing better. And if that's not happening, then, you're better off saying, I think you might need to go elsewhere.
Yeah. And I say it's not always our fault, It's not that we've actually been
Emma, I
mean
tell
to
you,
them.
it's never my fault.
We never like to take the blame. Sometimes maybe, but
I always get the blame, but it's never my fault.
you keep telling yourself that.
Right, let's move on to a little bit more golf specific stuff. How can a golfer try to manage stress and anxiety during a tournament? I know if we start with amateur stuff, all the club championships, so all the biggest event of the year at all the clubs is pretty much going on around this time of the year. So what can those guys do to maybe manage the stress and the anxiety during playing these events?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I like to, I guess, share with people, get people thinking about, is the fact that stress and anxiety is normal. It's probably not what you want your psychologist to say, but it is. Everyone there, whether they're expected to win and they know they're the best golfer at the club, or whether it's their first comp they've ever entered, everyone's going to be feeling nervous. It's normal. We're human. It happens. What I like getting people to think about is like what happens to our body when we're nervous. So people start talking about your heart rate increases, you sweat, might feel sick, might need to go to the toilet all the time. All those kind of things happen. And then I get them thinking about what happens when you're excited. And they gradually realize that exactly the same things happen. Your heart rate increases, maybe you sweat, your breathing goes up, you might feel a little bit sick because there's so much kind of energy in you. So all that's different is that we have labeled it as something different.
Yep.
So we have gone, this situation kind of scares me a little bit, therefore this feeling must be nervousness, rather than I'm looking forward to this feeling is excitement.
Yeah.
And simply labeling it then makes our body act in a different way. So when we're nervous, we get tight, we get quiet, we start second guessing everything. Whereas when we're excited, we relax, we're, up for the challenge, we're ready, we talk even more. And that's just by giving it a name.
Yeah.
So on a really, simple level, just can you reframe what you're feeling in that moment? Because everyone's got those feelings, but you don't have to call it nervousness in a sense. The other thing, I guess, there's a really, let's say, like a big theory that is the one I like the most, which is this whole thing about challenge and threat states. And the idea is that when we come up to a performance, whatever it may be, we either go into this challenge state, so almost a bit of like a fight or flight, so a bit of a fight state, or we go into this threat, like keep me away from this is going to damage me state. And then our performance depends on what state we end up in. So it's thinking about the fact that a round of golf, you probably have played hundreds and hundreds of times, barring if you've maybe just started out. But the actual event that you have got to do, you have done before. And all that's changed is you're now putting demands on top of that. So you're saying now it means something. Now there's pressure on me. Now I could potentially damage my self-esteem because everyone is expecting me to do well. If I get beaten by someone that's completely new to it, that's going to damage me personally.
Yeah.
So go back to basics of what is this event? Have I been here before? Was I able to cope in that situation before? How did I manage that? And bring all of that forwards into that performance now.
Yeah.
Because like I say, it's exactly the same thing. You know, if you do take it to football, for example, if you do a penalty shootout at the end of a training session with your friends, or you do it in front of 100,000 people at the World Cup or at the Euros, you're still doing a penalty shootout.
Yeah.
It's just the demands of it are slightly different. So preparation is huge. How you prepare for it. You know, the more we know about the situation, if we can walk into a match, say you're going to go and play in a comp, and you can walk into it and say, all right, I know what to expect. I've been here before. I know that I need to turn up an hour early. I know where the food's going to be. I know where the toilet's going to be. I know where the first tee is. Things like that relax us. If you're playing at a club you've never played at before and you get there late and you don't know where anything is, you don't know where you need to go, you're already increasing your stress.
Yeah.
Before you even start playing anything.
Yep.
So bear in mind kind of the smaller things in terms of your preparation, and that can be preparation on the day, but also your preparation over the last weeks, months, years of playing. You know, build your confidence and go, well, actually, I set myself goals over the last year that I've achieved every single time. So I've put in the work, I've put in the effort, I've had loads of lessons, I've been out on the course all the time. And essentially, if we can have, I like to call it like a toolbox of, so that's our preparation. It might be being prepared, so having like a little bit of a routine that you can use, knowing your surroundings, knowing the people. If we build our toolbox and we come into a situation and we go, you know what, I've got all the tools I need to cope, then our body can relax and we can play.
Yeah.
Whereas if you turn up and you look in your toolbox, you're like, oh, I haven't got anything, you're going to stress and then you're going to be worried kind of going into that.
Yep, that's good. That's good. So that would be over a tournament per se. What if it comes down to the last part on the last hole of the tournament? How does a golfer perform in that circumstance? Same or slightly different?
Should be the same. However difficult that will be,
Yeah,
it's the same. Every shot you play in a match is the same. Because you know what, if you made the putt on the 15th, it might not come down to the putt on the 18th.
yeah, yeah.
So that's not me saying it's your fault. You should have done better earlier in the round. That's not my advice there at all. But every shot is important. You know, your tee shot lines you up for your next one, and then you might take an iron that gets you, you know, perfectly on the green, and you've all set it up.
Yeah.
So every shot is important there. There's let's say two things, I guess, in golf that I think can be really good in that kind of last minute, lots of pressure on one's particular shot.
Yep.
One is staying in the present.
Yeah.
So not thinking about that missed putt or that missed tee shot that you had earlier in the round, but focusing on the here and now. And the other one is having a routine, like a pre-shot routine. So I guess I'll deal with the first one, staying in the present. One thing I like to give as advice. So in golf, you've got a lot of time. Some people see it as a blessing. Some people see it as a curse. A lot of athletes like fear having time.
Yeah.
They don't like it. They're like, oh, I can think, and that's my downfall.
Yeah.
But if you use time well, it can be really beneficial for you. So a piece of advice, if you're walking up to your final putt that you need to go well, that last, let's say 10, 15 yards before you're getting there, I like the term, I am where my feet are. So literally looking at your feet as you're walking on the ground, putting all your focus on being where your feet are, stops you thinking about anything else. Because however much, and it's typically girls and ladies like to say that we're fantastic multitaskers, it's not possible to multitask.
Yeah.
It's not possible. You know,
Yeah.
if we're watching TV and we're on our phone, you notice that 1 minute you're focused on the phone, then you focus on the TV, and you kind of flip between the two. You can't focus on both.
Yeah.
You know, if I got you to, let's say, drive in a straight line, and I put a clown at the side and said, right, look at that clown as you're driving in a straight line, you're going to start veering off the road. It happens. So if you put your full focus on just walking along and breathe, you know, breath work is huge. It can relax our bodies really, really well. It will calm you and it keeps you focused on the present, not what happens if I get this shot, what happens if I miss this shot, and not, oh, I missed this shot earlier and it's very similar, so I'm going to miss this one. Got to focus on kind of the here and now in that situation. And routine should be, and I did some work recently with a golf academy, and it's incredible that at all ages people might have a routine that they do before a shot and they're happy to do it on the tee. They stand there, take their time. Then gradually, as they get closer and closer to the hole, this routine just either gets quicker and quicker or just disappears altogether. They're like, oh, let's just get this over with now.
Yeah.
But if you have a routine, which I would recommend to every golfer or every athlete, to be honest, it's got to be the same behaviors in the same order, the same number of repetitions of those behaviors, and it should last the same amount of time. Yeah. So whether you're out playing with your friends and there's no pressure on it, or you've got that final putt to win, the routine should be exactly the same. And that in itself can be a bit of a challenge because people are like, pressure comes on and people just think, I want this to be done quickly. And I think that's when it kind of dissipates a little bit.
We used to, when I thought I could play at a time, I worked with a psychologist, and we used to rate my round on how, if I managed to stay within my timing of my routine. So we would time the routine on the range over and over again and set, it was about 44 seconds, if I remember it. Mm. And then I used to go play 9 holes with him there, and he'd time the routine, and it had to be within that threshold of a certain amount to rate it pretty highly. It was quite interesting that if you stick to that process, then it does take a lot of thinking or a lot of overthinking out of it and brings it back down to just follow this routine and you'll be all right.
Yeah. And it does, like, you know, if we really think about it, we're routine creatures.
Yeah.
You know, if I said to you right now, like, what do you do each night before bed? Yep. Typically it's the same things. You know, when you wake up, typically you do the same things in the same order.
Yeah.
Even to a point, some people like will drink the same number of gulps each time. You know, we love a routine, and all a routine does is it tells us what we want our body and our brain to do next, because it can kind of follow and it becomes predictable. It goes, okay, if I do this next, then that, I know what it wants me to do.
Yeah.
So we love a routine, but it's like you say, it's tough to stick with it. You know, you really have to, it takes time and it takes practice. And I think that's a big thing with all psychology. It's like going for a golf lesson. You're not going to go to one golf lesson, be told to change something, and within 5 minutes be hitting it perfectly every time. It's not possible. And I think people want a quick fix. And psychology definitely isn't a quick fix. It takes practice, it takes work, and it takes time to do.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing again is, I mean, I definitely, my motto would be I still try and change a ball flight within 3 golf balls, because at least I know something's happening. But at the same time, it takes time to ingrain that stuff. And that's where I think psychology is massively needs to be ingrained, because those thoughts will never go away, but you have to manage them a lot. You have to learn to manage them and ingrain the new thought processes to help you manage them. And I think it's similar with golf, because everyone likes to go back to whatever feels okay for them. And some people, that'll be a bad golf swing. Other people, that'll be thinking negatively on the golf course. But it takes a lot of practice, and I think, yeah, that's where I think you start to separate amateurs and professionals from that sort of work. Is the professionals don't mind putting the time in on it, whereas the amateurs go, "Oh, this hasn't worked. That's it. I'm done with it."
Yeah, 100%. And I think, people say this a lot. The difference between an amateur and a pro, or your top five and the rest who are very, very good,
Yeah.
is how quickly they can switch. So if you're having negative thoughts, how quickly can you change them? Because like I said earlier, we're human. We're gonna have negative thoughts. We're gonna have a bad shot. We are.
Yeah.
We're never gonna come off and go, that was a perfect round. Nothing bad happened during that round. And I will call someone out if they ever say that they probably did walk around and do that. But it's how quickly you can bounce back from it.
Yeah. But it's interesting that just on that, it's interesting that if someone says that, they clearly are thinking, like if someone says, "Oh, I had the perfect round," they're clearly thinking differently because they're probably only taking in the good shots and not the bad shots. So it's quite interesting when if someone ever said that, is how their thought process is probably very different. They forget quickly about the bad shots and they focused on the good shots, which is probably a good way of thinking, to be honest. But when you have a lot of bad shots in a round, it then does get a little bit complicated, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Like we have an attention bias. So, I like to say, have you ever woken up one day in a bad mood? No reason, just in a bad mood.
Probably 6 out of 7 days a week.
It happens, right? And
No,
on those days, we find the negative in everything.
yeah.
Everything annoys us. People annoy us, things that are said annoy us, everything, people drive bad. We find the negative. And it's because, okay, we don't like being wrong, but our brain doesn't like being wrong.
Yeah.
So if our brain is telling us you're in a bad mood or you're not very good at golf, for example, it will actually find evidence to support what it is telling you.
Yeah.
And that's the same. If you've had a good round and you've played well, it will do the same. It will just pick out your good shots.
Yeah.
And actually, it can be really hard then to reflect and go, okay, I had a good round, but what can I do to get better?
Yeah.
Because you still need that feedback. That's how you get good. Bias is definitely, that's why I normally suggest if you're going to reflect on like a round of golf, do it half an hour after the end. Let the emotion, whether it's negative, whether it's positive, let it settle. And then you can look at it from more of a logical standpoint rather than an emotional one.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there will always be bias in what you're giving.
This must be very hard in your job as well, but I did this course with a guy that basically used to teach on tour, but one of the best coaches in the UK. And our first module for the first 3 months was all about biases. And you have to be, even when you don't think you are, you're still being very biased. And in coaching, it's massive because you can't throw your biases on someone when I'm 5'11", skinny. You can't go to a 6'5", I don't know, builder and go, "Yeah, mate, you got to swing it like this." So, and I suppose it's very the same in psychology as well, because everyone thinks very differently. Even if they may have similar traits, they still might get to that end goal in a different way.
And I think that's a massive part of the job.
Yeah.
Everyone is different. But also it's something for the athlete to recognize. That say I've run workshops before, and I always say at the beginning, I'm going to give you ideas of strategies, try them. But if they don't work for you, come and tell me, because maybe you just need something different. It's not that the theory is wrong.
Yeah.
But it's that people respond in different things. They learn in different ways, and their body works in different ways. I remember I had an athlete once who hated self-talk.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. I was like, why? And he said, because why should I always be nice to myself? And I was like, no, you don't always have to be nice to yourself.
Yeah.
And he said, like, he he liked it when he was almost looked down upon, because he liked to come out
Yeah.
and prove people wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, well, use that in your self-talk. Get yourself into whatever state you need to be in to perform well.
Yeah.
It doesn't, there are people think, oh, affirmation, self-talk, it's all about loving yourself. And you've got to be positive in terms of not being horrible to yourself, but it's to benefit your performance, and what you need to perform well is going to be different to what everyone else needs to perform well.
Yeah.
So it's knowing your athlete and then being willing to say, this doesn't work for me. How can I adapt it to help me?
Yeah. I have a very personal journey of that, because when you play, I mean, especially when you watch golf on TV, they all look very, very serious, very determined to play decent golf, and sometimes get a little bit upset about it, but you don't see a lot of laughing and joking on the course. And that is, I mean, if I didn't realize that in the last probably 2 years, I would have given up golf, I think, because I just cannot play golf like that. That is just not the way I play golf. I have to be an idiot, and I play good golf. If I'm not an
Sounds
idiot,
like normal life.
you get, well, yeah, it's very true. Yeah, it's very true. But if I'm not being, I don't know, like a class clown, then I'm not enjoying it. So now that's how I have to play golf, and I play good golf doing it, or
That's the
relatively
thing.
good golf.
And I think people forget that you always perform better when you enjoy things.
Yeah.
Sport shouldn't be a chore. It's a hobby for a lot of people. And if you're not enjoying it, then why are you doing it, in a sense?
Exactly.
Some people love the feeling of nervousness. That gives them a bit of a thrill. They like that feeling. Some people need to go out and, like you say, make jokes and have that laugh with it. Everyone's a bit different, but you need to get an enjoyment out of it. And it's huge. Then you'll play better. If you're miserable, you're never going to play well.
Oh, don't. Been there, done that. Moving on quickly.
Most people have.
Yeah. So we touched on pre-shot routine. Obviously, we said it's quite important. Is there anything that you would say should be included in a pre-shot routine? Obviously, I know we just touched on that everyone's different. So this could be this could be an open book, but is there anything that you personally have preference on seeing in there?
Yeah, like you say, it's a hard one because everyone's routine will be personal to them. Some people will have something within their routine that almost makes no sense to their performance, but they've done it once and it worked and they keep it.
Yeah.
But I would say there's probably three things that if you look at any of your top golfers, they typically involve in their routine. There might be other things that, like I say, fill it out.
Yeah.
But I'd say there's mainly three things: visualization,
Yeah.
practice swings, and breathing. I'd say they're probably the three things that are pretty consistent, and they help actually prep your body and prep your brain for what you're about to do. So I think sometimes people know that they probably should be included. Kind of, if you ask people, oh, what do the top 10 people do before their shot? They'll probably say it, but it's how do you actually use it to benefit the performance, rather than just doing it because you're a bit like, well, they do it, so I probably should do it.
Yeah. I've got
sorry, go on.
Sorry, just butting in quickly. What if you can never visualize a good shot?
Well, my advice in that, because I've had that before. I was working with a footballer who said he could visualize a part of play, but for whatever reason, he couldn't visualize the ball going into the net. And he's a striker.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's
like, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna have to work on that. So I would get him to watch himself score before going into the visualization.
Okay.
So for example, in golf, I would suggest practicing off of the course, so like imagery practice. So say before bed. But what you're going to do before you start visualizing is actually watch a video of you doing a good shot. Now, if it's that you're working particularly on your putting at the moment or on your short game, they're the shots you want to see. There's no point watching your tee shot because it's not going to help you to visualize it.
relevance.
But
Yeah.
if you've got something that you can base it off of, it's the starting point.
Yeah.
And then your brain will get used to it and go, okay, I can start to adapt this now to kind of get to where I want it to be. If you're doing that though, make sure it's a good one. Don't, watch a video of you trying to get out a bunker and it takes about 10 attempts and it keeps going backwards, because that's not going to help you visualize it in a good way.
Yeah.
It's just
Might earn you
reminding you that it
250
needs
quid
work.
on you being framed though.
Sorry?
Might earn you 250 quid on you being framed though.
It might. You know what? That's a career path in the making.
So on that again, what if this is a negative player? What if you can't visualize good shots and you go to that technique and you don't like the golf swing that you're looking at?
Then my advice would be more based, there's two things. Either what don't you like about it, and set up some goals. So as opposed to seeing it as a negative thing, pinpoint one thing that you dislike about it and you help it or use it to set your goals to make an adaptation, or use someone else's swing to help you go into it. Now, you've got to be realistic. From a different
angle.
Maybe. Yeah, if it's like he doesn't like what he looks like, then
film it from the green.
Yeah, then it'll be all right. You just see a little ball come over every now and then. But you've got to be realistic if you're using someone else's swing.
Yeah.
As in, if you've been playing for 2-3 months and you're using, I don't know, let's say be anyone in the top 10 as kind of your image that you're using, it's not realistic, it's not relatable.
Yeah.
Your brain's going to go, yeah, they've got a great swing, but that doesn't mean I do.
Yeah.
So find one that still is obviously a good swing that you want to be replicating, but don't make that jump between where you are and where that is too big, because it's not going to help you to the same extent as if it's like a small jump.
Yeah.
But yeah, don't be afraid to use other people's. Could be that you use your golf coaches.
Yeah.
It's not bad. Get them to test them, put them under pressure and be like, right, show me how to do it.
None of my clients will ever do that to me.
No, my advice to you right now is do that to George.
Yeah, please.
Test him.
But we're going to take at least 50 takes to at least get a good shot on camera. We're not going to use up.
Have to make sure the hair's right as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's not great today, so we'll swiftly move on from that one as well. What mental practices or exercises can golfers do off the course to try and improve their game? I mean, we probably touched on one right there.
Yeah, imagery is going to be massive. But you've got to be patient with imagery. It's not easy.
Yeah.
To actually be able to visualize every aspect, and it's got to be in detail, as in who's around, what can you see, even like what can you smell. If you're by say your comp's going to be by the sea, can you smell the salt from the water? Like, it's got to be really, really vivid. So I normally recommend writing a script that gets you thinking about the specifics in terms of what you're wearing, what does the club feel like, all that kind of things, just to get you thinking about it before you go into the imagery. And to start with, do it somewhere without distractions. Don't try and do it in a busy room the first time you try it. There's too much going on.
Can't do it with Love Island on, can you? No,
exactly. It's too much drama. It's going to take all your attention. No, quiet room, no one walking in, no one shouting for like, by the way, your dinner's ready. It's got to be like really quiet. In terms of, I guess, there's kind of two more things I'd say. One that's I like it because it's quite a easy one to incorporate. It's self-talk.
Yeah.
Like it's such a nice one to use, and we probably truthfully all talk to ourselves a lot of the time. I talk to myself all the time. And like I said, it doesn't need to be positive as in everything's going great, but it could be reminding you of the things you have to do. So has your golf coach told you okay, put your hand here, make sure it's shifted around a bit more, weight here, you know, instructional or motivational that's going to help you through.
Yeah.
But any of that needs to be practiced in training, because I like to use the example when I work with the academy, the golf academy. I said to them, I went, right, how many of you would turn up to a comp never having used a putter before and go out and play in your comp?
Yeah.
And they laughed. They were like, well,
Yeah.
no, of course I wouldn't. And I
Yeah.
was like, well, it's the same with psychology. You can't say, well, actually, I'll use it when I'm out on the course,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's like, well, you haven't practiced it, so
Yeah.
you can't expect to use it. But also make your training more similar to your matches.
Yeah.
So there was actually, I like it because it gets people's brains going a little bit. But there was this study where they got people to scuba dive, and whilst they were underwater, they got them to revise for a maths test. And then the day after, half of them went back underwater and had to do the test underwater, and half of them went to a classroom and performed or did the test in the classroom. And those that went back underwater got higher results than those that went to a classroom.
Yeah.
And it's because they learned in the same conditions as they performed in.
Yeah.
And that's going to be huge. So simple things like if you're up at the range, going through your clubs like you would on a course. So rather than standing and, you know, using your driver 10 times and then use your irons 50 times, like go through them like you would when you're on a course. Give yourself just one chance to get that shot right. And then depending on if you hit it clean and it went a long way, maybe you'll use a different club to if you absolutely scuffed it and it went off over the floor.
Yeah.
But make it realistic. Using routines in training as well.
Yeah. I think driving ranges nowadays are a lot more equipped for that sort of practice. We've got all the screens up where you can play golf courses. So if my clients aren't utilizing that, they normally get a slap round or a clip round the ear.
Yeah.
Too. Because it's just logical. Why would you not?
Exactly.
The only time when I tell anyone to hit more than one golf shot at a time is either technical change or speed training. The rest of the time is like, what are you doing? You're not gonna hit. When are you gonna ever hit a driver and then a driver again?
Unless you lose the ball, but that's not really what you should be planning for.
Exactly. Unless you lose the ball or you make a hole in one.
Yeah.
It's just
two extremes. Hopefully not happening too often unless it's hole in one.
Yeah. And sorry, Emma, I'm on a little rant here.
Okay.
And getting 100 balls at a range is just utterly ridiculous. Who's going to hit 100 actual full shots on a golf course unless you have just picked up a golf club? You're not going to hit, if you're half decent, you won't hit more than 40, 50 actual golf shots on the course.
Yeah.
The rest will be chipping and putting.
Yeah. And all you're going to do is be tired.
Yeah.
And everything gets harder when you're tired.
Yeah.
You know, there's benefit to maybe adding a few more so you are a little bit tired by the end, but you can't be doubling or tripling the normal amount you're going to be doing.
Nope.
So yeah, make it as similar as to the match. And also I like to say to athletes, like, put stakes on it.
Yeah.
So say you're going to go up the range and hit, let's say 40 balls for argument's sake. Say, right, I want 80% to be, you know, out the middle, clean shots, and actually test it. Don't make it 100%. It's not going to happen. You know, your phone might ring and you lift your head and you shank it. Things might happen that actually may mean that you hit a bad shot, but make it realistic. And if you set 80% at the beginning and you get 40, don't just leave it at 80. Bring it down so that you can achieve it and bring it back up again. I think people are so scared of setting a goal and having to drop it that they just leave it. But it just demotivates you. So like, well, I'm so far away from it. I'm not getting there.
Yeah.
So feel free to move it, but it's not a bad way to do it, and actually give like a reward and punishment. So say to your missus, right, I want 80% of my shots to be out the middle. If I do, we're getting a takeaway in a film tonight. And if we don't, I'm cooking for you.
Yeah.
you know, put pressure on it, because that's what you've got to deal with in the actual situation.
She's just thinking about that. Tara is getting a lot of cooking if I ever do that. Christ, I don't think she wants that either. No one wants my cooking.
No, you might have to adapt it.
Yeah.
Give a different one.
Yeah, maybe.
We don't want her to, you know, come too ill.
Yeah. Yeah, my cooking could possibly do that. Could possibly do that. Emma, where can people find you if they want to have a chat with you or look through your content, whatever you do? Where can they find you?
So I'm on Instagram, which I believe is Emma Biggin _ sports psychology,
Your guess is as good as mine. You should know it. It's yours.
I believe. But type in Emma Biggin, it will come up.
Yeah.
So I'm on there, and I put a lot of kind of what I do up on there. I put the links to the blogs that I write on there as well. I write them for a company called Leading Edge Sports Psychology. So me and someone else also writes blogs on there. So like I say, it's a really nice place that you can start having a look into some ideas. And they're all written in like a user-friendly way. I think that's the other thing with sports psych. So many big terms and dates and studies, and to be honest, it's boring to read a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So it's how can it be relatable to actually a sport or a person? So that's not a bad place to have a look as well on there. And yeah, feel free to message me on Instagram, and then I'll just share my contact information, and can always organise either online or in-person meetings as well. So
But yeah,
normally pretty flexible with that.
we are definitely over the next month or two having a date in the diary where we're going to do a workshop, or where you're going to do a workshop and I'm just going to sit at the back and how I can stop being an angry golfer.
Yes, exactly. Biggest challenge that I'll have, I reckon.
Yeah, but well, yeah, probably. Right, Emma, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming on. We appreciate
Thank you
your
for
time.
having me.
No, anytime. And we will see you very soon in person.
Yes, look forward to it.